Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We are back at it again, trying a new one where you get to see me. And again, this will be a short video. We'll have two videos just sort of talking about the process that we're going through. Once I have a chance to take a look at your tenants, I'm hoping to then post another overview of what's working, what's not working with those. But I'm sure you guys will have done an incredible job and they'll be perfect and we will just move right along. So anyway, week 8, here we are. We have 2 more weeks until it is time for spring break. And a couple things that we just want to go over. We are, in case you haven't figured it out, still in module 4 right there. And so we've got kind of a 3-part piece to this. The tenets, you've developed those, part 1. And then really thinking about metrics in terms of how you implement those tenets when it comes to the Ludlow School Community Engaged Design Practice. And then our last week, before we move into spring break, we'll be thinking about programs and design elements that respond to those tenets and those metrics. So that's that's where we're going. That's where we're heading. We are going to use green ribbon schools to help structure that in terms of a school environment. Not to load one more thing on there, but I think you'll find that it will be a benefit for you in this process. Couple things to go over. Please send me a link or invite me to view your mind map. I think you'll find I think it'll be easier for me to critique those if I can do that as opposed to a screenshot, because they tend to be small and I can't kind of zoom in there. So if you send it to me, I can zoom in. I promise I won't mess with it, but I can do I can tape it and make comments for you. We just reviewed the calendar, so that's good. Happy to set up online meetings this coming week. I am also happy to actually meet with you in person if you would like to be able to do that as well. Okay, so hopefully you can read this. So now we're sort of at that point where we have our tenets and you're starting to go through that assessment, evaluation, and proposal process. This foundation begins with you, the designer. Those tenets are yours, and those are what you believe to be the guiding principles for community engaged design. So again, as we were mentioning, that's what we want to take a look at. We've got those tenets. How do those then engage with LEED, with sites, with well building, with SEED, and then we've got our sustainable living community, sustainable living that Derek has added. So take a look at that as well. How do all of those things really start to look at this idea of school? And I think the one thing to remember as you're looking at all of these is that everybody has their diagram, everybody has their matrix, everybody is a slightly different variation on it. SEED is more about a process that you go through because it is so heavily community engaged. So we're not going to worry so much about the process by which we would go through implementing this project. We But there are some good aspects of SEED in terms of its guiding principles that really don't exist with anybody else. And so that's going to be part of this process. As we start to take a look at a green school and use that as this concept of a school building or facility, in our case, grounds, that create a healthy environment that's conducive to learning while saving energy, resources, and money. Obviously, there's a little bit more to it than just that. But what we really want to start to try to do is basically a filtering process that allows you to kind of, don't you start doing that to me. A filtering process that allows you to, I'm just going to put that little fucker down. We're not going to deal with that right now. A filtering process, try that one more time, that allows you to take your tenants, try it without screwing it up, maybe. Take your tenets that you have developed in terms of sustainable design, and then start to develop these metrics that come from our course resources. SEED, sites, as I was mentioning, well building, LEED. We're just going to look at LEED for existing schools, which will simplify that greatly. And then the Living Building Challenge. We're going to take that with Ludlow School. So I'm most concerned right now that you really focus on this. So we may talk about more generic programs and design elements as we come up to spring break. And then after spring break, when we've kind of said, yeah, these are great programs that you're talking about, these are great design components, and then we can add that lens more specifically to Ludlow and the surrounding community, and then really try to refine them. So La Finquita is the community garden. We're not going to get into the nuances of La Finquita, but we know we've got a community garden in the area, and it might start to satisfy some of these components. So that's pretty much where we're going with this. Again, with the end product, this proposal in report format with citations and elements, and then probably some type of an online webinar presentation of that. So, as I mentioned, we're going to use Green Ribbon Schools, and the Green Ribbon School structure will help as your proposal framework. It will help ground it. It will still allow you to get into some pretty interesting creative elements because it's pretty open-ended. And so we're just going to take a little bit of time right now and go through what that is. One other component that hopefully you have seen in there, Children Nature Network did put together a little report on green schoolyards and identified some multiple benefits for children, schools, and communities. I have some issue with this report because they have really dumbed it down in terms of the graphics, but I do like this graphic. And what I like about this graphic is it really kind of hits in a very simplified fashion all these different kind of components that deal with schoolyards. Saying is that most of the other ones are more architecture focused. So this is in that report. Take a look at it, and I will, under the module for week 8, relink back to some of these previous reports that you've got. So with that, a couple of things we want to talk about then in terms of green schools, very briefly, history and development, how it works, how it's grown. Not that it's grown much, and outreach and communications and how that works for it. Again, this is a U.S. Department of Education proposal. And basically there was a public request from 80 NGOs that launched this concept with a pilot year. And then in the summer of 2011, award criteria was developed further with partners. And again, this is an education component, which is what's good about it. And I think will be of benefit to others as after this, you guys have completed all of your work in the studio. It is a federal outreach and engagement tool that's structured as an award. It honors schools, districts, and post-secondary institutions. Unlike LEAD or CITES, it's not a certificate, it's just an award. And it does communicate resources and practices, and although the award does not come with funding, it opens up all sorts of opportunities for funding and other levels of STEM education within a school district. So it becomes a great avenue for additional funding. And it also connects to potential partners. So what it is, as we were just talking, it's not a certificate, it's not tracking or rating, it's not a grant program. And as we had talked about before and as identified in our mind map, it has 3 pillars: reducing environmental impact and costs, not unlike SEED, LEAD, everybody else. It also looks at improving health and wellness like everybody else. And then it's only additional component that nobody else has, except for maybe the living building one, and we'll get into that in a little bit, is providing effective environmental education. Now, I realize that you guys are not K-12 education experts, but again, we can get into some general descriptions of the types of environmental learning in terms of interactive outdoor learning versus some general categories. And we can also take a look at what we have from the Boston Schoolyard Initiative as a little deeper dive once we get past spring break. So pretty simple diagram, but I did like this one because it sort of shows obviously that net impact is the reduction in waste and water, energy efficiency, heat island, lots of good positive reductions. And then health and performance going up, as well as environmental literacy. So the educator goals in this is from a student achievement standpoint, health and wellness, and the connection to that with achievement. The idea of a more well-rounded education that is not siloed, that is not stuck in these different compartments, but is more holistic. STEM knowledge, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, is what STEM stands for. So knowledge and engagement, everyone is starting to realize that if you understand what it means to be a scientist and find ways to be a scientist in a more practical day-to-day operation, you start to understand scientific literacy better. You start to understand claims, evidence, and reasoning. You really start to comprehend these things in a much better way. College and career preparedness, again, you are looking at a more holistic approach that starts to make more obvious links to different aspects of learning and more lifelong learning. And then civic skills and values, being a good citizen, interesting enough, is a big piece of this, which then connects back to SEED, which definitely connects back to well-being and a couple of the other components that we've got in CITES and also in LEAD. Post-secondary aims, again, not that they matter, but reduce college costs, STEM engagement, green career connections, and civic skills and values. Teaching those at a K-8 environment is important because those do move on with the child. So interesting thing about this is it's a nomination process. So schools that are interested and districts, they must be nominated by their state education authorities. which is kind of changed. And then only up to 5 schools or school districts and a single post-secondary institution in a state can apply per year. So that's what starts to create some of its exclusivity. That's what starts to make this a difficult reach for a lot of underserved communities that don't have the time and energy to prepare the packet, because that packet is very open-ended, and so then you're just basically competing against other schools. There is no rubric that you can hit, so it makes it difficult. A lot of times you will apply, and then you will get it, so the following year you try again and again, and so that's sort of this idea of progressing in every pillar until you get to the point where you are sent forward to the feds. So keep that one in mind. Again, each school then is evaluated based on those 3 pillars. It encourages underserved nominees. That's kind of, what would the analogy be? It's sort of like, gee, we really encourage you, but we're not going to give you the bandwidth or the support you need to be able to do it. And so you will just go up against all the crazy soccer moms in the more affluent communities. So there's no curve on this. And then, as we mentioned, state authorities send those nominees towards the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. There is no federal application required. Each state evaluates its candidates as it wishes. And then they document how nominees are progressing in every pillar. So it is the state's application. In some respects, I wish there was a federal application because it wouldn't be quite so loosey-goosey. And I don't know much about each state's of folks who evaluate these. This is all new territory to me. Nor do I know how they document this. And we're not going to really worry about those aspects of this right now. I just wanted you to be aware of the process. Excuse me. This is from their website, some of the pictures. And I'm not 100% impressed with some of these, but just some examples of education and learning. This is high school. We're not going to be making a solar car, so don't look at that one. But we certainly might be, in terms of our building, looking at those great flat roofs and how many solar panels or green roofs we can stick on them. Certainly a possibility. Recycling and what that project looks like as a component. Greening, parent community involvement. Zero waste, and really trying to look at reducing the carbon footprint becomes important. And that is all of those guys. Obviously, low-hanging fruit for us, edible schoolyard is a big one. Couple pictures of students getting a tour. Definitely T-shirts. How do you sort of rally the school and community around these things? And here's a high school student with her wildflowers for pollinators. So right now, got about 200, and it's up now, about 250 schools, 37 districts. So it's not very big yet. We've got 30 plus participating states. And I would like to see these guys have some kind of a target that they're trying to get to, but I'm not quite sure how that's working. Unfortunately, I think they need to throw a little money at this to make it go faster, but that doesn't seem to be the issue. They are looking for new collaborations, and they're looking at how this can start to create more resources going into the schools, even though it's a completely unfunded program, which is interesting. There are some other websites for additional information, but I think, again, for the purposes of what we're doing right now, we have these larger categories. We can start to take a look at other schools that have one, but I'm really not so concerned because we're not trying to apply for this. Rather, we're just using this construct and this framework around these three pillars to weave in all this other information. So that is going to do it for that piece. And then I'm going to come back here shortly with another video looking at the mind map. So I will see you guys shortly.